Hey, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Coffee with Tamara. That's me. Actually, today I have tea because I'm feeling a little bit under the weather, but I'm here and I'm excited to connect with you. Hey, just as a reminder for those of you that are new, we love this format because it allows us to engage, allows you to ask questions, to interact with me and with our guests. So, hey, if you've got a question, put it in the chat bar. Don't be afraid to ask. And if you've got an aha or insight, put it in the chat bar. I'm a big fan of collective wisdom, and I know you have a lot out there to share. And speaking of sharing, let's talk about what I'm going to be sharing about today. So today is all about oh my gosh, I'm tongue tied. How not to become invisible, strategies to continue to stand out in a world that actually values and expects disruption. So I want to start by sharing with you kind of a high-level story about disruption that I think really sets the stage for why this matters so much. And then I want to talk to you about a personal story that really hit me in the face of like, whoa, you really need to make sure you are who you are and who you're meant to be, and that you're standing out and doing things in a way that really differentiate yourselves and resonates. As I always say, different beats better every time. And in fact, I'm just going to go off on a little tangent before I go into my story, is to tell you that I think one of the mistakes I see people make time and time again, and that I know I've made in the past, is trying to outbetter someone. The problem is, let's say you go a little bit faster, you have a little bit higher quality, you have a little bit of a better product, whatever it is, right? You have a little bit better ideas than the person down the hall. Here's the problem with that. That puts you on a hamster wheel, and that person can outbetter you, or that other business can outbetter you any day of the week. They can become faster. They can become slightly higher quality. They can become all those things. That's why I think it's a hamster wheel. So you don't want to be on that hamster wheel. Different beats better. It is hard to copy you when you truly have a point of difference. You stand out as unique and ownable. I always tell, particularly entrepreneurs, but I think this absolutely applies to personal brands as well. I always say that you want a brand and a product that is ownable and defendable. That's what keeps you relevant. Think of it like, what's a good analogy? Think of it like a moat around a castle, okay? So that it makes it really hard for people to come in. That's what you want for yourself too, right? You want value and impact and a voice that is distinct to you, so that I always know it's you. Because if you haven't had an impact by disruption, and I'm pretty sure most of us have, you will soon. So that's my soapbox. Different beats better every time. Someone can always outbetter you. It is a hamster wheel that will exhaust you really fast. But if you're ownable and defendable, if you're truly different, it is very hard to keep up with you. Think for a moment about the brands and the businesses, the people that you love. Isn't there something like super distinct about them, super unique about them? Yeah, of course there is, because they're ownable and defendable. So when I think about like the biggest strategy for not becoming invisible, it's those two things. It's funny, I didn't write those down. Those aren't on my list here of things to talk about, but I feel like once I get going, I always realize something that I think is really important. And that was it. Ownable and defendable. Your work should be that. Your voice should be that. How you walk through the world should be that. And I'm going to give you, obviously, I'm going to give you some tools and some tips on how to do that. So we're going to get to that in a second. So let me drink some tea and share my story. Okay. So I want to start high level and then go really personal. So a little while ago, I was traveling for work and I had to rent a car. I haven't rented a car in a long time. Normally, especially when I travel for work, I tend to do Uber because I land in the city in the conference or whatever it is. It's pretty close to where I landed. But whatever, this time around, I needed to travel. So I rent a car and I have to go wait in that rental car line. Do you know what I'm talking about? In the little, like, it seems like the food court of rental cars with all of them there. So I'm standing in line to get my keys, and I'm behind these two business travelers who are clearly there for some kind of new business pitch. They're constantly talking about the sales pitch, what to say, the client. And we're standing there and things are moving along quite fine. It's like, there's no problems. It's not even that busy. There's a couple people ahead of us, but the people behind the counter are moving them along. And we get up to where it's almost our turn, these guys in front of me. And one guy turns to the other guy and he says, I literally cannot wait for the entire rental car industry to be disrupted. This thing is archaic. Now, I'm a little bit of a nosy neighbor. I'm like, oh, there's a fight coming and I want a front row seat to this. This is exciting because in my head, he's complaining and I'm thinking he's going to go up to the counter and he's going to tell them he's mad because he had to wait. He's going to tell them the car's not right, that he had to rent. I don't know. I don't know exactly what his complaint is, but I'm pretty sure it's coming. And I'm pretty sure I'm excited for the fight, right? This is like a boxing match and I have front row seats. So people in front of us go, this guy goes up to the counter with his colleague. I'm standing there and if you see me on video, I'm like leaning in, like I said, waiting for it to happen. And he gets up there and he says something to the woman behind the counter and she does what they do and starts clicking away. And he's talking and she's talking. She hands him the keys. No joke. Here's what happened next. He turns to her, and he smiles and he says, thank you, and walks off. And I'm left wondering, well, where's the fight? Where's the battle? Where is the supervisor that needs to come out and soothe these customers? Nothing. He just said, thank you, and walked off. Here's why that story is so relevant and important to all of us today. People in your world don't tell you they're frustrated. They don't tell you you're falling behind. They don't tell you you're becoming irrelevant and invisible. People just let it happen. These guys at the rental counter chose not to tell the people in front, like, hey, you need to fix this. This is not how, Uber now just shows up. There's a million technologies out there. Fix this, right? They didn't say that. They just sat there and literally said, I cannot wait for disruption. Well, that's what's happening in all of our world. So yes, the people around us, particularly when we have great managers or great clients, really want us to succeed. But the reality is you don't know that people are vying for disruption behind your back. That's the reality. And not because they want to see you fail, but because that's the world we live in. If we don't at least value disruption, which most of us do, we're looking for something better. How many times, by the way, have you seen a product or a business and you thought, oh, that's a much better way to do X, Y, Z, right? And you welcome it. You want it. You want that disruption. Now, I'm pretty sure if you're that other business that's just being disrupted, you don't feel that way. So if we don't at least value disruption because it makes our lives better, we find things that are more relevant or different, right? Ownable and defendable. If nothing else, we at least expect it. We expect to be on shaky ground. We expect things to change. First of all, two stats I want to throw with you. One is in a survey recently done, 62% of people said that they no longer are loyal to brands. Think about that for a minute. 62% no longer loyal to brands. What does that mean? It means we're willing to switch out. It means we're willing to go to somebody else for advice. It means we're willing to try a different product. So there's some beauty and some value in that, but it means you got to really work hard to stay relevant. The World Economic Forum put out a report basically saying 44% of workers' skills are going to be disrupted by 2026. I talked about that when we dug really deep into that in a previous podcast, but I just want you to think about that. That's not way in the future. That's right now. We're in March of 2024 as I'm recording this. So disruption is there. We don't always know it's coming, and people don't always prepare us for it or tell us, hey, you're falling behind, right? These things happen. So, and we, if not value, we expect disruption. So no, it's there. So that's kind of from the high level. That rental car story or experience kind of blew my mind because it really made me realize, like, wow, there's a lot of disruption happening and a lot of expected disruption coming that people are like, yep, it's happening. I can't wait. And I'm not going to tell you, you just need to keep up. All right. Lesson learned. Here's the second story I want to share with you though. And this one's a little bit more personal. And this to me was a real eye opener about why it is so important to really have that ownable and defendable personal brand that stands out, that has a huge impact. That's the one that, when you walk into the room, people know what to expect of you and they want that from you. That matters. So early on in my career, I was being groomed to take over the presidency of this brand strategy and innovation firm. We were based in Denver. We worked globally. The president was looking to step into a chairman role. So I've been asked to take over as president. Now, because of that, I was asked to come to the board meetings. We had this incredible board full of wicked smart people who had years and years and years, decades of experience between them. And every quarter was then the president, and then hopefully me, had to go into these meetings to present our earnings, where we were struggling, where we needed advice, where we had big wins, all the stuff you present to the board to get their feedback. So I'm starting to go to these meetings because that's my job, being groomed to take over. And I'll never forget the first meeting. I was so nervous because it's my first time in front of the board like this. I'd met them all. One of them was my mentor, actually. So I knew them, but not in this capacity. And I went into that meeting and I thought to myself, okay, Tamara, just be quiet, get the lay of the land. Don't say much. Don't rock the boat. Don't really offer your opinions yet. See where everybody else is coming from. Next time, you'll have your strong voice back. So I go to the meeting and I do exactly that. I'm quiet. I'm writing a lot of notes, probably hiding behind my notes a little bit. I don't really say an opinion even when I'm asked. I give kind of a wishy-washy answer. And that's how the meeting went. It was 3 hours. That's how it went. Now, I left the meeting thinking, oh, nailed it, right? I nailed it. I got there. I stayed quiet. I got the lay of the land. But the next day, I was having lunch with one of my mentors who also was on the board. And this guy never minced words. I adore him. And his name is Bill. And Bill said to me, before even getting the menu, I don't know what happened in the meeting the other day, Tamara, but you better speak up because the decisions about your career are being made when you're not in the room. Oh my gosh. That blew my mind. The decisions about my career are being made when I'm not in the room. How right is he? And then he went on to say, here's the deal, Tamara. We asked you to step into the presidency role because you are so direct. You have a lot of opinions. You're very confident. You tend to push the boundaries, push limits. We're in innovation. That's what we do. We need the person at the top to be that person. That's who we thought you were. She didn't show up the other day. He was 100% right. And so in the next meetings, I had to really work to prove against the mistake I had made. I had to show my worth. I had to prove that I was the person they thought I was, because I had this personal brand, but I chose not to live it that day. And that was a mistake. And I think when we know who we are in our personal brand, it's actually something that we should live every single day. Consistency is important. Showing up as your authentic self is important. But I didn't that time. And that was one of the best lessons I think I've ever had about how to not be invisible and how to stay relevant through disruption, was own who you are. And I'll never forget his opening line that the decisions about your career are being made when you're not in the room. So the question I have for you is, first of all, do you even know who you really are? What are your gifts and what are your strengths you really bring to the table? I don't mean guessing, and I do not mean your job description. I think that's a big mistake a lot of us make, is we think that our job description, doing our job well, that's our personal brand, or that's the voice and the legacy that we leave behind. That's just what you do. That's how you should be doing your personal brand in your job. Every time you send an email, every time you stand up to do a presentation, every time you pitch a product, every time you interact with a customer, you should be living your personal brand. So when I think about how to not be invisible, here's what I think, okay? And I wrote some notes here, as always, because I never want to forget. I want to make sure I tell you everything. First of all, adopt a personal brand and live it daily. I see a lot of people, they're like feathers in the wind. They don't really know what they stand for. They really don't. I'm going to tell you, you can't see them because I have to turn my computer around, but I have sticky notes in front of my desk that have my values on it. And they're part of my everyday innovator archetype and who I am. And they're what I want to bring to the table every single day. And I can tell you what they are. Good question. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 6. Yeah, 6 of them. So you ready for them? unreasonable, exceptional, compassionate, curious, real, and direct. So those are the things that really matter to me. So my innovator archetype is the pioneer, which is audacious, bold, tangible, and real, right? And I'm all about pushing the limits and paving the way for others. I tend to leap first and show others the path. The experiential side is very tangible, real. Like I'm really good at showing people the viability of ideas, bringing ideas to life. I bring that to everything I do. I'm gonna talk about the other triggers in a minute, but that translates to my values, which are to be unreasonable. And what I mean by that is unreasonable to me is about expecting the most and expecting the best. When I look at the people I really admire, they didn't have reasonable expectations. They had unreasonable expectations. And I've always kind of lived that life. And I think that that's been part of my success, is being somewhat unreasonable in what I expect. So second is exceptional. I don't think you should be unreasonable unless you're going to bring exceptional work to the table. So I want everything I do to be exceptional to my best ability. I want the experience that I give the world to be an exceptional one, not average, not mediocre, not good enough, but exceptional. Compassionate. So if you've listened to any of my podcasts, you know I really believe strongly in listening without judgment of people and really seeking to understand what motivates people, what drives people. I mean, human behavior to me is fascinating, but I think you can't do that unless you come with a little bit of compassion for wherever their circumstances, wherever they're coming from. Okay, so curious. I always seek to know more. I'm annoyingly curious, and I don't think I'll ever stop that because I want to know. Real, so that's honest, transparent, and that kind of leads to the last one, which is direct. One of the best feedbacks I ever got from someone who worked for me was, with Tamara, we always know where we stand, good and bad. She always tells us exactly like the truth of what she thinks. And they were saying that in a very positive way. Sometimes it's a little off-putting for people. They're like, oh my God, that was so in my face direct. But you can see, right, those are my values. So you got to know it and you got to live it. It took me work to get to those. I had to understand my innovator archetype. So that's our IQE assessment and what it tells you. And I'm going to dig into that a little more in a second. And then you got to be willing to say, well, what do I value? Like, how am I going to live my life? Right. And that for me is it. And it's funny because now that I look at that, it 100% aligns with my archetype. And I think if I hadn't known that exercise of turning it into kind of values and behaviors wouldn't have been so easy. Okay. So number one. Number two, know your gifts and know your strengths. This really is about your innovator archetype. So here's the difference. Gifts are innate and they can be unlocked. Strengths are skills and they can be sharpened. And you have both. So I, as the pioneer, I have gifts in getting uncomfortable and paving the way. I have strengths in being a risk taker and leaping and flexing those risk-taking muscles. Do you see what I'm saying there? It's a little bit of both, but your archetype holds the key to both your strengths and your gifts. So the third one that I want to say, so we've talked about adopt your personal brand and live it, know your gifts and strengths. And the third one is be agile and resilient. I know you hear this time and time again, but change is not only constant, it's accelerating. So you gotta stay agile. You got to stay resilient, which, by the way, is part of your archetype and your innovative mind, because your mind is actually built to do that. Your mind is actually built to navigate change. We've just shut it down, and sometimes the primal brain gets in the way and tries to make us safe and comfortable. But the reality is you're ready to be agile and you're ready to be resilient. So that's important. So adopt a personal brand and live it. Know your gifts and strengths. And flex those muscles of agility and resilience. And by the way, those are strengths. You can strengthen those. If you are starting on the low end of those things, you feel stuck, you feel fixed, you can work on improving those. If you're on the high end and you're like, baby, I'm the most agile, resilient person ever, awesome. You can even make those better. Here's the real. Fixed people fall behind. Growth people keep up and even get ahead. So that agility and that resilience and understanding who you are authentically is really important in staying relevant and staying visible and not becoming one of those invisible sidekicks that don't get anywhere. I don't know why sidekick, just that car came to mind for me. Okay. So let's talk a little bit about, well, how do I do that, Tamara? So let me share some things about the triggers and share with you how that really helps you stand out and differentiate. So as I said in the beginning, one of the things that's really important is actually truly understanding what it is about you that is different. What is it about you that's ownable and defendable? And that knowledge is inside you, and also it's inside your everyday innovator archetype. So, for example, the gatherer, which is a combination of collaborative, which is all about putting disparate people and ideas and experiences together, and the inquisitive, which is all about digging deep, innovations in the questions, not the answer. So, collaborative, experiential, inquisitive, you're the gatherer. And what is unique about you? Well, here's what describes you: magnetic, inclusive, intense, curious. That is a point of differentiation. That's the person. If you're the gatherer, that's how you need to show up every single day and in every interaction, which is very different than, for example, if you're the driver, which is futuristic and tweaker power triggers coming together. So futuristic is all about forest through the trees, today's problems, tomorrow's opportunities. You tend to be able to see 10 steps ahead. Well, the tweaker is about adjusting, editing. That great win is just one little edit away. You as the driver, here's what defines you: pioneering, visionary, focused, dynamic. Okay, so that's very different than if you're the gatherer, which is magnetic and inclusive. So for me, I'm the pioneer. I am audacious, bold, action-oriented, and driven. I cannot show up as the gatherer, magnetic, inclusive, intense, and curious. I can try, but I'm pretty much going to fail. Or the adventurer, by the way, who is action-oriented and driven and confident and agile because they're experiential and fluid. Right? That's a very different vibe, a very different personal brand than the other ones I just mentioned. So there's actually 36 archetypes. They're the combination of your top 2 power triggers, and there's a presence of a dormant trigger. Here's how I like to think of these. Your power trigger is your tailwind. It's like pushing you forward, creating momentum. It's your wellspring of innovation. It's your gifts. The dormant is your headwind. It's exhausting and makes it a little bit harder for you. It pushes against you. So you want to not necessarily avoid, but not allow your dormant trigger to create traps for you, to sabotage your efforts. I like to focus on strengths. So when we talk about archetypes, we're really talking about the strengths. So that comes together to create your unique everyday innovator style. And then from there, there's 36 archetypes. So no 2 brain, by the way, is the same. It's just as unique as our thumbprint. And it's our gifts and our strengths overlaid with our experiences and our perspectives, our upbringing. It's nurture and nature together. So let me give you another example. I want to take you through a little bit of the power triggers. So you'll have a combination of 2 of these to make up your archetype, but this is how you stand out and how you make an impact. So if you listen to nothing else in this podcast, hear me out on these 9 triggers and how you own them to differentiate yourself and stay relevant, right? So if you have collaborative in your archetype, you see how things fit together and you get buy-in for your ideas. Who doesn't want that in the world? I know I do. I definitely want that because that's the opposite of me, right? I tend to be more solo and more leap. I need the collaborative to help me see how things come together and to help me get buy-in for my ideas. So that person, differentiated, highly valuable. They're all valuable in different ways. The experiential, so someone who has experiential in the archetype brings ideas to life, helps others see potential in ideas. Bring ideas to life. So many ideas get stuck in analysis paralysis or even just in our brains. But the experiential, if that's you, so valuable, you help overcome that. Fluid. So if you have fluid in your archetype, you see clear paths. You make sense of confusion and uncertainty. How valuable is that right now? So valuable, right? You take all that mess and you pull out the nuggets for people. If you have futuristic in your power trigger, you look ahead to the impact of today's decisions. You're always 10 steps ahead of the rest of us. You see future possibilities and you get people excited about the future. Hello, right? We need that right now. We can't just be stuck in today. We've got to have more strategic foresight. You do that naturally. That's your point of differentiation. If you have imaginative, you bring fresh perspectives to any situation. Wow. When so many of us are stuck in old thinking and stale thinking, How valuable is having those fresh perspectives at the table? You bring that to the table. If you have inquisitive in your archetype, you challenge assumptions and break old thinking patterns. Wow, assumptions are the enemy of progress. We need people like you to challenge them and to break kind of those, just how it's always been done, gears that are turning in our head. Instinctual. You see the patterns and insights. You make sense of situations. You see how all that stuff, like random dots, come together, and you elevate it. You make sense of things when others are confused. Again, especially in today's world, that's something that you bring to the table that the inquisitive and the imaginative and the other ones do not. Risk taker. So you make bold moves and you pave the way for others. You inspire others to follow you. Make bold moves. When we're stuck in incremental, stuck in close in, you're the one that pushes everybody else to keep going. You see how ideas can be bigger and have a bigger impact. And then finally, tweaker. So you find the small adjustments that make the biggest difference. So while others have often given up, you're like, nope, if we just do this, and then it's like magic and everything comes together. But that's something that people need, like especially someone like me who's a risk taker, experiential. I'm all about today. I need that tweaker to be like, if we just do this, Tamara, actually, we can keep this going. You have a tendency to keep projects moving forward. So you see, those are the 9 triggers, and you have a combination of 2. So if you have imaginative and inquisitive, for example, you bring fresh perspectives to any situation, and you challenge assumptions and break old thinking patterns. How valuable is that? Versus someone who has instinctual and risk taker, they see patterns and insights and make sense of situations and make bold moves, paving the way for others. So I want you to think about yourself, what you bring to the table, and how you create that ownable and defendable brand that is yours, that is distinct, that is so valuable, that becomes sought after and in demand. Because I think the reality is, like I said, disruption is something, if we don't value, we certainly expect it. And let's face it, we're all, particularly in the workforce, we're all being squeezed by all sides. Change is squeezing us. New generations coming into the workforce is squeezing us. So there's a lot of competition out there. It's cluttered and it's crowded. And there's this circle of sameness that we have to get out of. Knowing your everyday innovator archetype and understanding how to live that really helps. If you are interested, shoot me a comment and I will make sure to add in the values exercise that I do. So once you understand your archetype, you can do the values, which is what I did, turning into unreasonable, exceptional, compassionate, all those. But I have an exercise for that. So hit me up and I'll let you know. Put them in the comments and I'll make sure to add the link. I just want to say this in closing. I think it's really important that we stay curious, right? Ask what if, ask how come, ask, is there another way? I think it's important that we stay flexible. We got to ebb and flow with the times that we're in. Let's stop white knuckling. And I think we got to stay open-minded to diverse perspective, diverse ideas, new ways of doing things. I think it is very easy in today's world to get really fixed and to get really kind of like, heels in the ground. But the problem with that is no matter what you do, the world is moving forward. There is no standing still. The reality is only forward and backwards. So if you're standing still, what you're really doing is moving backwards and the world is moving forwards. That's not the place to be. Like I said, fixed people fall behind. Don't be one of those. Understand what makes you in demand, high value, what makes you distinct, and then own it every single day. Because like Bill once told me, the decisions about your career are being made when you're not in the room. And that applies to whether you are a new person in the workforce, a leader, a CEO, an entrepreneur, a startup entrepreneur, whatever it is, the decisions about you being made when you're not there. So make sure the brand and the story and the value that you bring to the world is the one that you want to own. All right, everybody, it's a little bit of shorter podcast today, but I got to keep my voice intact. But I really wanted to bring that to you because I've had a lot of questions about personal branding and being relevant. So here we are. Tamara out.